3D printing tips that many of you have been asking in the comment section of what you would like to know. Now this one will really help you out for future prints. Now, this person asked me about filament settings. What is the correct setting for PLA? Filament-wise, when you get your setting here on the slicer software, you select PLA in the generic or whatever type you have, but I would recommend just going to generic. You go over here to quality, like you go over here and you select show custom. Now let's see, where are we? Oh yeah, this will be added to it. Infill density. Let me pull up a print real quick to show you the reason why. Now, when it comes to infill, it's very important what you're using. Now, the infill pattern. The infill pattern will actually help you get the right thing you want. But there are different designs, but the 3 recommendations that I would highly recommend if you're doing cosplay props, replicas, or even like house-held items, I would recommend that you use cubic, which I will show the difference right about now. Now, this is what cubic looks like. The next one I would recommend is tri-hexagon. And the third and final thing I would recommend is gyroid. Now, I would not recommend overflowing the infill on gyroid because this thing wiggles in a snake-like pattern. Like, look at this. It's pretty mesmerizing, isn't it? This, if you had a 20% infill on the gyroid setting, that thing's going to be tough as a brick. So I would recommend switching it down to 10. So that way it's not using so much. But it gives a very strong support, but also a really cool, like, pattern. But yeah, those are the type of settings that I would use. Now, we're going to talk about walls. Now, I recommend that you switch this one to 1.6, which is this, and then your walls, I would recommend you change them to 5. Now, this is what the 5-layer line looks like. So we had the wall line count for 5. We have, sheesh, sensitive. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 lines here. I recommend that you use either 5 or 6. 4 is a good one that you can use as well, but I recommend using at least 5 so that way it gives a stronger foundation, but also helps you connect to your prints better. Now, filament-wise. Filament is very, very important. Now, you have the printing temperature. The material that you're using, it recommends between either 180 to 220 to print. Here are my recommended settings that give me really good quality, like really, really good quality prints. My print temperature, which is my nozzle, I do 210. My build plate temperature, I go between 60 to 70, but 60 will help you get like a better adhesion to the build plate. Print speed. Now, when it comes to print speed, I would recommend 3 different print speed settings, depending on what print you're doing. I would recommend 65%, 70%, and 80% speed for PLA. So that way, your quality is great, depending on what you're printing. That way, your quality will look good, and it will print it as quick as possible as you need it, and as soon as you need it. Retraction. Retraction is very, very important. Retraction, I would say, for your settings, you got to make sure that when you have retraction, it's going to look like this. Make sure you click on this square here that enables retraction. Retract at layer change. Make sure to click that box there so that way when you're moving to the next layer, it pulls the filament a certain distance that you set it to, and then moves to the next layer, and then pulls it down back into the hot end system to melt the plastic again. That prevents stringing. The retraction settings. I recommend that you start out with 4.0 millimeters retraction distance and 45 millimeters speed for the retraction speed. Now, you can go ahead and play around with this all you want to get the right settings that you feel comfortable with, but these are the settings I would recommend you start out with first to get the hang of it until you're ready to mess around with it yourself. Combing mode. A lot of people don't really care about it. Usually they have it off or they just put it not on the skin. I would recommend that you put all on it if you're ever going to use it, because combing mode will help prevent stringing. It'll rub, as you can see on the mouse cursor here, it'll rub against the layer lines here when it does its certain layer it's doing. But when it's done with its layer, it rubs around it to get to the next layer so that way it doesn't cause stringing on multiple parts if you're printing multiple parts or printing one piece that has holes or something like that on it for detail. Now, avoid printed parts when traveling. I would definitely enable that just to be safe. And avoid supports when traveling too. Yeah, and make sure those two are enabled. Z-hop when retracted. If you're not using combing mode, make sure that is enabled. Make sure when you're Z-hop retracting, it'll lift up its Z end, which is the hot end, the nozzle piece. It'll lift up the certain height you give it and move to the next location. Now that's 0.2. I'm actually going to lift that up to 1 millimeter height. So that way it lifts up pretty high and moves out of the way without touching your print and knocking it off the build plate if the print has a problem or something like that and it touches the wrong part of it and knocks it over. Now when it comes to generating supports, you can have a setting that turns it on or turn it off. You can actually press this right here to turn it on or turn it off, you know. Now support structure, you can have normal or tree. I'm not going to be able to show you right now, but I could probably show you a small... Oh, speak of the devil. Never mind. Hold on one second. I got a print that I can show you. That's what the tree settings look like. The normal one is just the blocks, as you saw in the printer over there. So, yeah, that's what they look like. Now, support overhang. Make sure, and I'm telling you this, make sure it's at a 70-degree angle. So that way you're using less filament for the supports, and it doesn't take as long as it should. It helps you like save money on filament and time on it.